Guys, welcome back to the channel. I thought I'd do something different, and that is do one of these ranking lists. I've never done one of these before, considering I'm currently in a contest prep where I'm going to compete on a bodybuilding stage and get into some very tiny pants and try and be as lean and muscular as possible. And I'm dieting right now. I thought it was the perfect time to rank some foods by how diet friendly they are. And I hope in that process you'll learn something too, because I'll give myself, or I give you reasons why I've picked for foods to be placed in certain areas. So let's run through it. Some of it is just also going to be personal preference, of course. So anyway, I selected the mushrooms here. Mushrooms are definitely S tier. You just can't beat a mushroom for the amount of volume. Okay, let me rectify my statement. If you cook a mushroom down, it starts moving itself down to like C tier, because the volume that you lose through the water that's lost makes it not great. But themselves, mushrooms don't have tons of fiber, and as I'll come to many times during this, fiber can become an issue within a diet because you're trying to fill yourself up, but you go so high in fiber that digestion stops taking a knock. So they don't have that much fiber, and they have quite a bit of protein with them too, and they're not that high in carbs and like no fat. So they're actually definitely an S tier. Whereas if I go for another veggie now, corn. Man, I find it hard to rate any plant as like D tier, but it's probably a C tier in terms of like vegetables in particular, but foods in general. Corn's tasty, man. It's not that diet friendly, and it's quite actually calorie dense. So let's go to something else. We've got some Greek yogurt here. I am tempted to put this into S tier. It obviously depends. I'm going to go, it's 0% kind of fat Greek yogurt, but I might put it into A tier. The reason for that is because Greek yogurt also has tag along carbohydrates because of the lactose in it and things. So it's not quite the same as having some chicken breast. Now, it's got casein protein in there, which is slow digesting, which is pretty good. But Greek yogurt itself isn't always that thick, and I don't know. I'm struggling to put it into an S tier. It could be, but I'm going to give it A for now. I might move things around. So let's go for some bagels. So I'm just going to give them straight up D. They're not a great diet food. They don't provide they don't provide much in terms of the amount you get per bite. So in terms of calories per bite, it's pretty high. And because this looks like a non-whole wheat bagel, limited fiber, which at times is needed, but it's just not going to provide much satiety. So for most people, that's going to be a D tier. Well, cucumber, definitely right up here in S. I've actually just recently begun to really enjoy cucumber. A few reasons. So similar to mushrooms in that per bite, there's very low calories. There's loads of water content within a cucumber, but there's also not that much fiber, which again, for a vegetable, if you want to eat a lot of it, fiber starts racking up, and that starts to become a problem. Lots of roughage, and that can block you up and just lead to not the best digestive state and bloating. The other thing I really like about cucumber is it's super fresh, and also it's crispy and has good crunch. So that texture component within a diet is just real good. So let's find something else. We've got beef. So beef, for me, I'm going to put it in the A tier as well. It completely depends on the cut. I would generally suggest 5% fat beef. If you go higher and higher, it's going to move itself down to B, C, D. But I find beef in for itself to be pretty palatable. Like, it's quite tasty, but not like it leads to huge amounts of cravings. But it's got quite a taste to it, whereas tuna, which is down here, and other forms of protein that maybe don't have those fats alongside it, and not red meats, more of the kind of chicken and white fish. It's just not that tasty, and the texture's good from beef. So actually, I'm going to put it as a steadfast. It's getting an A there from me. Peppers, I'm going to put those in A as well. They're just not quite on the level of these guys, but they're pretty damn good. Again, not tons of fiber. I find them quite palatable, good crunch, but the number of calories in them is slightly higher than a cucumber. Again, I struggle to put any kind of fruit or veg lower than S, because I think fruit and veg are just amazing for dieting. But if I'm going to differentiate it a little bit, I'm going to put it there. Then I'm going to go for some white rice. Man, people really like to diet on white rice. I'm actually going to give it D. I don't find it filling at all. It's very easy to digest. That's one of the reasons a lot of people have white rice, and that's because it's got like no fiber in it. It just goes through you super fast. and there's not that much bite to it. I've mentioned texture a few times. I think that gets missed a lot of the time when people are talking about diet foods. You don't want something that just goes straight through. It's similar to like soft, spongy foods that like they just don't give you much bite. It's just not very satisfying. So for me, white rice, it's not something I would include in my diet. So go for eggs. I do like an egg. And these are eggs. I haven't got egg whites here, but I'm going to give these a B. They're pretty good. The reason they're pretty good is you have to consume some fat in your diet. Eggs are a great source of fats to be having. So I think including the egg yolk is a great idea for health. But when people's fats get quite low, especially later in diets, you might want to include less and less of them because they fall out of favor essentially. So they're B, but only for the fact that if you're trying to go quite low in fat, they become a bit more challenging to get in. But I think they can be great because they're super versatile and they're pretty tasty, especially if you have the yolk there included. They can be great with omelets. I really like having them boiled eggs. You get, again, some texture at least. You can make, omelets are great because then you can chuck in loads of veggies. You can make it quite big and make it a real thing. But yeah, anyway, they're going to be a B from me. Protein bar, I'm going to give them a D. Protein bars, the only great thing that they have in terms of being diet friendly is that they're portable, which is handy when you're out and about and you're on a diet, and it's better picking up a protein bar than it is to, have a chocolate bar, because at least you get some protein with it. But what I'll say is, if you are in control of your food, you're at home, protein bars are just naff, because one, fiber issue. This is a huge issue, and sugar alcohols. If you have a protein bar, suddenly there's like 10 grams of extra fiber in your diet. And if you're having quite a fibrous diet anyway, which you probably should be with whole grains, lots of plants in your diet, your fiber is just going to get out of control. And if there's that on top of with sugar alcohols, that can cause quite a bit of an upset stomach. So I don't find protein bars to be very handy outside of just convenience. So they're in a D for me. Let's go carrots right up here. Do I want to put them in S? I like a carrot, and the reason I'm going to give them an S over like a pepper is for that bite sensation again. You can eat carrots raw, they're pretty tasty, and they have more to them than what a pepper would. So it just takes longer to eat, longer to chew, and that's probably where that texture part comes in, right? Is when we are chewing things, we take our time with it. There's more time to then pass for our body to recognize satiety, and that's a good thing. The more time when you can be eating when you're dieting, probably the better, right? In terms of like the number of chews and bites that you can take, the quicker it's gone, less ideal. So that brings us to pasta. I'm going to put that in D as well. Pasta is just as bad as white rice, in my opinion. In fact, it could be worse because pasta is quite tasty. I'd say it has a nice texture to it. If you have it al dente, you get quite a nice softness to it, but also a little bit of hardness. And when you cover it in sauces and stuff, man, it just becomes so easy to get down. Like if you're massing, pasta's great. Chuck on a really tasty sauce. Chuck in a bunch of like beef with that, like a bolognese, for example. Very, very tasty. So yeah, pasta for me, if I was going to have something like that, I would maybe combine it with a, what are they called? You get like spaghetti noodles, squash noodles rather. I've forgotten what they're called specifically, or a spaghetti squash. I've heard of that as well. We don't really have that in the UK, but I'd probably like try and combine it with that. Or you can get like courgette or courgette, which is like made into like spaghetti type courgette. You can kind of combine it. That could be pretty decent. Olive oil, oils in general are going to have to be D. Unfortunately, because olive oil in particular is a really health promoting fat, and unsaturated fats, just a very good thing to have part of your diet. So I would like to have some of that. But if I was going to have fats as a direct source, I'd prefer to have something like getting in some of the eggs, for example, versus adding fats to anything. When you're dieting, you generally don't want to add fats to meals because it's kind of like an unnecessary evil. And you just don't get much satiety from that liquid. It's almost unnoticeable. It's a great hack when you're massing to just like slither some olive oil over every meal. If you do 10 grams of that every meal, you're getting hundreds of extra calories through the day, which is going to harm you when you're dieting. So we're going to go tuna. I'm just going to put that in with probably the eggs. Reason for that is tuna, depends how you have it, but I'm going to say with spring water and brine, so you don't get the added calories from the oil. When you have it like that, it's not tasty. It's not nice. So you always have to add something, I would say, generally, to tuna to make it any sense of palatable. And it might sound contradictory because low palatability is generally a good thing in a diet, but you have to find this balance. And I'm talking about like just generally diets. I'm not talking like deep end of contest prep. What are the like things to eat? You would basically want to eat low calorie per bite and super unpalatable foods because you just don't want to eat. But with tuna, if you're generally dieting, it's a good diet food, but you generally have to want to add some mayonnaise, or you want to add like some salsa is quite often what I do because that's quite low calorie too. In fact, I wish I had that in here because that might be an A or S tier because as a sauce, it's really useful. I've got no sauces in here. But yeah, I'm going to give it a B because it's just not as easy to eat as having, for example, chicken breast, which I'm just going to go ahead and put in right in the A column here. So because chicken, you can season that without any really additional calories. You can just salt, pepper it. Beautiful. As long as you cook it nicely, you can eat chicken as just chicken. It's super versatile. You can have it loads of meals. Chicken, you just can't beat it. That's why it's such a big bodybuilding food. And versus tuna, similar macros, but much tastier, much nicer to be able to have. Apple, I would be tempted to put it in A because it's such a cornerstone of my diet, but S. I'm going to put it in A just because it's similar to a carrot in terms of the bite. So the amount of crunches that you get, the amount of time that it takes to eat, but it's tastier and it's higher in calories. So that's where it's going to go there. It's super convenient though. If you put apples in your fridge, they last a long time. And again, you can just take an apple out anywhere. You can walk down the street, eat an apple. You're not going to get weird looks, whereas you might with a carrot, which might not be ideal. Tofu, unfortunately, I haven't actually eaten tofu. And the reason for it is probably because it's a D. I didn't think I'd have this many things in the D list. I feel a bit bad. And I feel bad for putting tofu here because I think if you're a vegan and you have got used to having high amounts of fiber in your diet, tofu could be completely fine. But there is tag along carbohydrates there. I think fats as well. As a protein source, it's decent if you're plant-based and you're vegan. But if you're omnivore, you include animal proteins in your diet, it's just not comparable on a diet. It's just a bit tougher to include. And I would put that along with something like soy protein. Unfortunately for me, I do enjoy soy protein. I think it's great. I'd often replace my tuna or chicken with soy. There are tag along carbohydrates involved, but there's a lot of fiber as well. Again, any plant-based food is going to have lots of fiber with it too. And the fiber just starts getting out of control. Again, if you're on a high protein diet, you're already eating plenty of veggies, your fiber is just going to go wild if you start including quite a bit of tofu or soy, which if you can handle it, awesome. But I personally can't, which makes it, and it ends up being a D. So let's go over a rice cake. I'm going to put that in D as well. The reason I included rice cakes is because they're just so popular in bodybuilding diets. And they are basically very similar to white rice, but puffed. And I don't think that additional volume from being puffed makes up for the lack of fiber, assuming they're like you're using a white one. If it's whole grain, maybe it's slightly better. But I just find, for me personally, and I'd love to hear from you guys, when I eat a rice cake, it just goes through me and I'm like, I don't feel like I ate anything. I wish, actually should have got one of these, put a corn cake in here. Corn cakes, a little bit nicer to eat. There's some flavor there. And you can get corn thins, which I've just remembered. I might actually get some of those. And those basically are half the calories, I believe, per corn thin, and much more crunch, much more satisfying to consume. So if you find a corn thin, I would say a corn thin might even be in B, which is pretty decent. That leads me to popcorn, which I'm going to put in B. I'm between B and C for this. But popcorn can be great. It depends, of course, the type you get. But if you just get popped corn, and you can even get like some diet popped corn, which don't have loads of fats added, minimal fats, in fact. And if you can get like a sweet and salty, that becomes a bit too hyperpalatable probably, and you can just eat it and it'll go straight through you. It is a little bit like rice cakes. So I do feel a bit contradictory here, but there's quite a bit of fiber also included with popcorn, which again, it sounds contradictory, but not tons, but a decent amount that makes them a little bit more diet friendly. I'm actually going to put it down to a C. I don't think it's quite B, but it's better than a rice cake, I would say. Berries, they got to go up in S. Berries as fruits go, very low calorie per bite, and If you go for raspberries, strawberries in particular, you get a lot of volume for the number of calories. Blueberries, not so much, but blueberries are a staple in my diet just like year round. They actually, again, like all berries, but blueberries have a particular number of micronutrients that make them really healthful and health promoting. And I love frozen blueberries in protein oats. That's my go-to. It cools down the oats and it gets it ready for me. And I enjoy that meal probably too much. That goes back to the palatability thing. You want to have foods that are enjoyable, but not so palatable that they lead you to really craving them. So there's like a bit of a fine line there. So that actually makes me wish I put dark chocolate in here, because I'd probably include that because quite a few bodybuilders have dark chocolate in their diet. If I was to include dark chocolate, I'd probably put it in a C above olive oil, because again, it's fats and quite calorie dense, and quite tasty, but a little goes a long way versus normal chocolate. Like you can have a bit of dark chocolate, it's like a bit of bitterness, and it can melt over like oats or whatever, and it can go a long way. And I'd prefer to be eating my fats if I can, than like drinking them like olive oil, you know. Olives are probably, olives would be above olive oil. So they'd be like, a good olive would be C or maybe even B. Anyway, that's berries, really, really solid one. Then I'm going for whey. For me, whey is probably in here. In A, I would put it in S because I really like protein oats. And so just a good whey that thickens up in oats can be really great. But if you drink your whey, it's right down in D. Starts to become not very satiating at all. But because whey is so convenient and it can really bolster your overall protein intake quite nicely, and protein is like satiety inducing and it's versatile, I do think whey is a great food to have on a diet. But I would try and eat it and not drink it. So that'd be like putting it in protein oats, combining it with some Greek yogurt, or some people have even made like protein pancakes with it, or like I've made a protein mug cake before. You can just put in some baking powder, make it into a thick goo, and then put it in the microwave, make so like a protein cake there. Or even like drizzling it over, like people make like a whey drip and they drizzle it over things. Yeah, but part of me wants to put it in B, but I'm going to leave it in A because it's just such a cornerstone of whenever I diet, it's right in there. Nuts, I'm going to put in a C. Again, for the same reason as it's going to be above olive oil, because you get to bite something for your fats, but they're high in fat. And inevitably, that means they're high calories per bite, which makes them a bit less diet friendly. But there is some fiber included, and there is that bite included. And you do have to have some fats in your diet. It's just higher fat foods in general aren't going to be as diet friendly. It's just by default, the 9 calories per gram of fat. So if it's high in fats, it's just not going to be quite as diet friendly. But I definitely think a C, it's a good idea to kind of have some in there. And I guess you could look at this and think about S tier foods I could have in my diet, more like S and A. I'm going to have more in my diet, and then B, C, D, I'm having less and less of these foods in my diet because they're less diet friendly. So I'm going to put bananas in B, which again, I don't like putting fruits or veg lower than A, but they're not quite there with apples. Again, don't have the bite. And bananas, I think most people find them a little bit more palatable. And generally, if you're going to eat a banana, per banana versus average apple, average banana will have more calories. So it's a bit more calorie dense. You don't quite get that bite sensation. It's a little bit lower in fiber, which also could be a good thing in some contexts. And I do think they're relatively versatile. You could use them to bulk out like oats and things like this. But for me, it's a B. So white potato, probably no surprise here. It has been found to be one of the leading satiety-inducing foods if you consume it without like frying it or adding loads of palatable things to it. If you have a boiled white potato, I microwave them super quick in the microwave and add those to meals, like they're just a winner. Also tons of potassium in them, and generally potassium's a great thing to have, although you're probably not lacking in that if you're eating enough fruit and veg. So I think white potato has to be up there in S, and I'm going to give oats S as well. I think a lot of people might disagree with this one. Probably the most controversial one is oats, but for me, my main carbohydrate source is oats, and I will keep that for as long as possible. Now, oats, again, why might people not be a fan of oats? 1, some people just don't digest them well. 2, some people don't enjoy oats. But 3, oats have fats that potato won't have, even rice won't have, stuff like that. So there are some fats included within oats, and I don't know what other reason people wouldn't, because you can bulk oats out. You can either include like things like courgette, or people do cauliflower. Again, you can add bananas, blueberries, you can add fruits to oats to really bulk them out. So it can be quite a lot, but you can also cook them with quite a lot of liquid to make them low calorie per bite. You can also make them very thick. So my thing at the moment is cook oats with water, add in whey protein powder, make it very thick, add some blueberries in there, let that cool, top it with maybe some, maybe peanut butter, or even, dark chocolate. Let that cool down for about 30 minutes, and it makes quite like a thick, flapjacky texture. And I like things, again, coming back to texture, I can eat it over an extended period of time. Like when I eat a burger, I just eat a burger, and it's just like, it just all goes in my mouth really quickly. Or if I eat rice, like it just is flaky, and it's just like, I can't eat that slowly. Whereas this like holds its shape. I can like eat a little bit at a time, and the texture's just great. Like there's some bite in there too if you don't make it too runny and everything. So I think if you do oats well, which does generally mean you need a good oat. I use Tesco own brand Scottish oats. I've tried different oats. They don't quite cook the same, or they take ages to cook. And then you need a good whey that doesn't lead to, when you add it, to make the oats runny. That kind of sucks. I've even seen people do some non-sweet oats, so savory oats. I've not tried that, but that could be a win too. So yeah, I think this was enough foods to go by, where I've given you some sense of where I would rank my foods as diet friendly. If there's any foods you would like to add, let me know where you would put some additional foods and where you'd rank them. And if you would do anything differently to this, to me, then let me know. And I want to make sure that I leave this, give you some take homes in terms of what to look out for diet friendly food. So one is preference. You notice here where I talked about just things I enjoy. And I think it is important to enjoy your diet as a whole. There become a point where you're just so hungry you enjoy everything, but you got to enjoy your diet. Then you want to look at for low calorie per bite foods. That's going to be fruits, veggies, things like this. Higher protein, lower fat foods are going to be a bit more satiety inducing. And then you want to think about also not letting your fiber go crazy. That can just start causing you all sorts of issues. So if you just eat tons of carrots and peppers and like berries and potato and oats, like you can get to a point where it's just too much. So you might have to include some list foods to kind of get yourself into a better position. And palatability is something you do want to consider. When you're earlier within the diet, you can have a bit more palatability, but as you diet longer, you might want to reduce the palatability and kind of climb down that hedonic staircase, as it were. Just like on the way out of a diet, you can start climbing out. You don't want to just suddenly switch on and off with these things. So hopefully this has been entertaining. If you'd like to see me rank anything else, let me know. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment. I appreciate it. And I'll catch you in the next one.